Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Some people might join late, but that is totally fine. Welcome everybody to the Raising Little Food Waste Warriors workshop. This is being offered as part of the DMV Food Recovery Week, which is co-hosted by the DC Food Recovery Working Group and Manna Food Center's Community Food Rescue. The DC Food Recovery Working Group comprises a variety of partners from nonprofits, for-profits, government agencies, and food recovery advocates. And the working group promotes and develops food recovery programs, organizations, and resources for Greater DC. Community Food Rescue is a program of Manna Food Center, and it's the coordinated food recovery network of Montgomery County, Maryland. This program enhances the good work of businesses, individuals, and organizations that already recover and distribute perfectly good food to people experiencing hunger. We'd like to thank our media partner for DMV Food Recovery Week, which is Radio 1. So a few quick housekeeping items. Today's event is being recorded. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat box throughout the session. We want this to be really interactive and we want to hear from you. A link to the slides is going to be posted in the chat at the end, and we're going to be sending out a survey about DMV Food Recovery Week in the next few weeks, so look out for that. If you're on social media, we encourage you to post with the hashtag DMV Food Recovery Week about what you're learning. And please check out the rest of the week's events. There's still some events tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday at dmvfoodrecoveryweek.org. You can still register. And let's go ahead and get started with today's workshop. Amanda, can you go to the next slide? All right. So quick introduction. I am Claudia Fabiano, and I am on the board for the DC Food Recovery Working Group. I also work at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. Amanda?
And hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Stone. I also participate in the DC Food Recovery Group, and I also work for the World Wildlife Fund. And I also am a mother of a 3 3/4-year-old and a 17-month-year-old.
And we're super excited to be here tonight, and thank you all for coming. I know there's probably a lot of Zoom fatigue out there, so we appreciate you taking the time, and we hope this is a lot of fun. We want this to be interactive. So, you know, we know how frustrating it is to cook a meal and watch your kids eat it or not eat it, throw it on the floor, or whine about wanting something else to eat. And so understandably, it's a source of frustration and guilt for many parents when their kids end up wasting food. But there are some easy ways to get your kids to be less wasteful and turn them into scrappy food waste warriors in the process. So today we're going to cover some basic approaches to mealtime, some tips and tricks and recipes to reduce waste and get your kids to enjoy eating what you serve them. Again, please do keep questions coming in the chat. We'll be moderating it. And finally, we do just want to say up front that we're not pediatricians or dietitians. We are moms who work in the food waste world. We recognize that some eating challenges with children may require professional help, and we are definitely not those professionals. So we just want to throw that out there. Next slide, Amanda.
I would also just add that we are speaking here tonight as moms and not necessarily representing the positions of our organization, though this is an issue that we both work on in our workplaces.
Thanks, Amanda. So are you on you're on the next slide?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I don't want to spend too much time on why food waste is an issue. Many of you are probably well versed in this. Some of you, may have just heard snippets here and there on the news, but in the United States, we actually waste up to 40% of our food. And when we waste food, it usually ends up rotting in a landfill or going to an incinerator, as is the case here in DC. But more importantly, all the resources that went into growing and distributing and storing and cooking that food are wasted too. So if you have questions about food waste issues in general, Amanda and I could talk all day. Put them in the chat or send us an email. We didn't want to spend too much time on that framing. But we do just want to say that, while we do waste a lot of food in the United States, you might be thinking of, oh, it's all wasted in grocery stores or in hotels or left on the farm unharvested. But actually, a large percentage of food is wasted in our own homes. So it really does add up. We all have a role to play in addressing the issue. And learning to make some small changes in our lives to waste less food at home can help us save money and also just spend less time shopping for and cooking food that we end up throwing away. And with children, we really have this unique opportunity to instill good eating habits and behaviors at an early age and a general appreciation for food, which can lead to a less wasteful future generation, which is why talking about these issues when our kids are young is so important. Next slide, please, Amanda. So we want to hear from you a little bit. Let's go ahead and if you can type in the chat how old your kids are or your kid. If you don't have kids, that's fine too. And your biggest challenges with kids and food waste. Just anything that's on your mind. What is an issue you might be having with your kids? Are they throwing food on the floor? Do they just constantly refuse to eat vegetables? Anything on your mind?
I will go ahead and share that today my daughter brought home her entire egg salad sandwich from school without having touched it. And a little note that said that she does not like smashed eggs. She only likes whole eggs.
Classic right there. So I'm not seeing much come in the chat. So you're all being shy or you're still thinking about it. That's okay, but please do type in anything you can think of that you're having challenges with. A few things that we know of that we experience with our own kids are, control, power struggles can lead to kids refusing to eat. Tastes change all the time. Kids will eat an entire melon on Monday and Tuesday they won't touch melon. Kids might throw food on the ground because they want attention or they're bored or they think it's a fun game, but there you go, then that food gets wasted. Sometimes food could be difficult to eat. It might be the wrong size or too hard or too crunchy or too spicy or too sour for them or for their age. They might not be hungry at mealtime for various reasons. We might be just consistently serving them too much. And there are underlying reasons for that. We, as parents, of course, want to provide for our children. And so we often tend to overserve to make sure that they always have as much as they want. And that can often lead to waste if we're sort of consistently doing that.
I think we have a couple in the chat. Similar themes, kids who won't eat veggies. Pediatrician says we should always present them, which we agree. Won't eat almost anything we prepare and whine constantly for something else. They change their mind about what they like every other day. That happens all the time. Will eat the food off for sandwich bread, refusing to eat foods that they loved the day before, changing their minds. A 3-year-old wanting adult-sized portions, I know that. But we've got some teenager grandchildren and younger students in the crowd. Getting the oldest one to try new things, always hard, and very picky, lots of pickiness.
Yeah. Okay. These are all well within the range of normal issues, I would say, that we have heard of and we've seen in our own homes. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. And we're going to try to cover some tips and approaches for all of these issues. And sort of before we move forward, I want to be really clear. I mean, parenting is really hard, even in the best of circumstances. And we all just want our kids to be healthy, happy, and safe and well fed. So don't beat yourself up about how much food is being thrown away in your house. This is definitely a non-judgmental space. We're here to provide some approaches and ideas to help you make some small changes and really to have more fun and less stress at mealtime with your kids. Ultimately, this is really as much about wasting less food in our homes as it is about raising a generation who appreciates the value of food and who will ultimately be good stewards of the environment. So just keep that in mind. Like, we're not here to judge any kind of food waste happening in your house or with your kids. Amanda, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Okay, so let's dive into this. And here's a few things to keep in mind, sort of echoing on some of the themes Claudia was just mentioning. The first is that kids pay attention to what we're doing. They're like little mimic birds, even if it feels like they don't, which it most of the time feels like they aren't paying any attention. So whether we always leave food on our plate, what we do with leftovers, whether we are composting, etc., one of the best ways to encourage them to be less wasteful is to actually be less wasteful ourselves. And even if it doesn't seem like it's creating a behavior change immediately, little bits of it will get ingrained over time. So the fact that like my 3-year-old already knows what compost is I think a pretty good indicator of like a direction. Second, kids are picky, which often feels like the bane of our existence. They'll eat one thing today, but they won't eat tomorrow, which we heard a lot in the last slide. However, providing access to a variety of foods and avoiding the all too easy trap of falling back on peanut butter and jelly or mac and cheese as a default will pay off in the long run. And lastly for this, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There is this funny thing in the food waste world where people say zero waste as the goal, but everybody knows that zero is actually impossible, and they really mean 90% when they say zero. So like getting 90% of the way there is considered to be the best that you can do, because there's always going to be a little bit of waste in your kitchen. So do the best you can and don't beat yourself up. Being a food waste warrior is a value and a choice, and something that we have to keep working on all the time, shifting our own habits and behaviors and those outside of our home as well. There's always going to be waste in your kitchen. Our job is just to work toward minimizing it. So how do we approach mealtime? The first thing, always start with small portions at a time, depending on the age of your kids, obviously. They can always have seconds, not just for food, but for milk, which is a very, very commonly wasted item as well. And that milk can always go back in the refrigerator. It can always go into your coffee. There's lots of ways to use it. But if you start small, then you can always add more if they think that they're still hungry. Next, if you have 2 to 3 options at the table for dinner, etc., a protein, a veggie, a carb, a starch, etc., they don't have to try them all. They could just eat only one of the dishes, but that is what they can choose from. You're not going to make them something special besides the items that are already on the table. And try really, really hard not to give in. This is about getting them to at least taste the foods that are already there. I missed one of my bullets. So here's the thing that we are likely all guilty of. We often offer dessert or treats as an incentive. So I talk about rewarding clean plates with positive reinforcement instead of dessert. Veggies are some of the things that kids waste the most of. So if they know they either have mac and cheese or dessert riding on the veggies, they may give in, which is good, but dietary experts actually say not to reward or incentivize eating healthy food with a treat or dessert, because it communicates that dessert is a more desirable or better food than veggies or the other meal items. So what I sometimes do, and again, I'm not a dietary expert, will give my kids a very, very small amount of all of the dinner options. So for example, chickpeas, rice, veggies, black beans, etc. And if they want more of one of them, if they eat one of them right away and they want more of it, then they have to finish the veggies or the other things on their plate before they can get more of one of the other more desirable options. I try to keep dessert and treats as a whole separate thing. If she can't or won't eat them, then no big deal, but then I just assume she's not hungry enough to actually need more of the other one. And we're trying to get to just work on it, actually consuming the veggies more and finishing more of what's on her plate. And then when they do eat all of their veggies, we try to make a big deal of it and, you know, applaud the fact that they ate them all and tried something new. So then moving on, small mouth, small pieces, cut it up. Making sure that food is cut into pieces or soft enough for kids so that they can handle it. For example, there's actually research that shows that kids, if you give kids in schools sliced apples as opposed to whole apples, it will significantly decrease waste because it's just easier for smaller kids to eat apple slices as opposed to the whole apple. My kids often want the whole apple because I think they like to hold it in their hands, but then you wind up with like a half chewed apple, which you can also then cut up and put into the freezer and save for later, and we often do that. And also some veggies are a little easier to eat cooked rather than raw, so carrots or broccoli that's steamed a little bit first, you can always try that. And then lastly, pick your battles. For example, if a certain plate, fork, or cup is being demanded and that will make the start of mealtime smoother, then go with it. My son eating a raw cucumber for breakfast. The all famous, I am not hungry. Sometimes you get to the dinner table and they say, I'm not hungry, or lunch. I am absolutely guilty of this, but they snack all day and then they aren't hungry when you get close to mealtime, which gives them an excuse to not clear what's on their plate or not eat their items and be wasteful. If kids are not consistently hungry before, during meals or before meals, then try to schedule some physical activity right before the meal. It has been shown in school setting that doing recess right before lunch results in kids eating more. A lot of kids do recess after lunch, but trying to up that physical activity before a meal can really help. If they aren't hungry and they're just not hungry, then you can always put their plate in the fridge and offer it rather than a different snack food later to basically, again, instill that these are your leftovers, let's have this for a snack instead. Otherwise, you may encourage kids to opt for not eating dinner because they think they'll get a different snack or maybe something less healthy instead later on, or like a fruit. You can also send their dinner leftovers in their packed lunch the next day. I also realize this is hard. Sometimes I know our daycare has COVID precautions in terms of what you can send. For meals that are going to school, try to find out from the teacher what's not being eaten, or ask the teacher to send back any uneaten food so that you have a way of knowing. This is harder with COVID, again, as reusable containers aren't allowed in some schools, and some schools won't send anything home. They're just throwing everything away to minimize touching. But if you ask, they still might. And if you know that your kids aren't eating some items, then you can send fewer items, which will often result in them eating closer to 100% of what you send the next day. Also, you can try to get your kid excited about what's in their packed lunch for the next day, ask for their input about what they'd like to eat, and honor that to the extent possible. For example, I will no longer be sending egg salad to school because I have learned my lesson. And I can respect that. I can respect her choice. Okay, knowing what's wasted. I think this is a pretty key point for us, especially at World Wildlife Fund. Do you know what's being wasted in your house? If it's not, it's actually relatively easy to find out. And sometimes we just like throw everything into the trash. But if you do a quick audit, that'll actually help you understand the items that are often being thrown away. The word audit may sound overwhelming, but it really doesn't have to be. And the knowledge of what's going into your trash can can actually help you understand what changes might need to be made, and empower you to choose the right recipes and or clue you in to what you might be serving in too large of a quantity. There are a few ways to do this, so do what's easiest for you. You can put a clear container, like a small bucket or a large Tupperware, on your counter for a few days. Toss food that you'd throw away into the container instead of directly into the trash. In addition, or instead, you can also write down some notes each time you toss something so that you have a sense of what's in there, like half apple, uneaten pasta, sandwich, bread, crusts, etc. Even if you don't make any notes, you'll still be able to see what's in the container if you're using a plastic container, which should give you a sense of what is being wasted. Depending on your kid's age, you could also keep track of why they didn't eat or finish the item, and you could get them to help you with this. For example, I wasn't hungry, it was too spicy, I didn't want to eat the same thing 2 days in a row, etc. If you don't want to keep the container on your counter, another way to do this is to snap a photo of the food that you're throwing away out before tossing it. And then you can just make an album on your phone for those photos, and after a few days or a week, look through the photos and see if you see any themes. It's amazing the type of difference this can make, and if you do it every once in a while, you learn new and different things. For example, a few years back, I realized how much I hated that lettuce always seemed to get slimy faster than I wanted it to. And after a quick powwow with my husband, we just decided to stop buying lettuce. We realized that we didn't like it that much. It wasn't really adding that much to our salads. And so now we just make salads out of cucumbers and tomatoes and other veggies, and we just don't bother with the lettuce. And it's like a significant waste reduction for us. We've also done this tactic at a much larger scale with major hotel brands like Hilton and Marriott. One hotel, they did an audit for a couple of weeks of time. They saw how much bread was being thrown away during audits, and they were able to actually significantly cut their bread costs. They could redivert their bakery labor, and they also were able to cut down on their butter purchasing. So it's just little things that you would be really surprised when you actually see it, and then you can solve for those individual problems. I think I'm tossing it back to Claudia.
All right, so we're going to talk about some fun recipes. Let's get scrappy now. Kids can leave a lot behind on their plates, but some of those things can be repurposed into other delicious snacks for them to eat. So the ultimate goal really is to get the kids to eat root to stem. That is like cook and serve the whole ingredient and normalize consumption of the entire item rather than cutting off or eliminating parts that we assume our kids won't eat. So in other words, your first goal should be to try to prevent wasting an item in the first place. But if that doesn't work, then we can talk about how you can use up some of those scraps that they might leave behind. So the first thing is bread crusts. This is a notorious item that kids won't eat, or we assume kids won't eat. A lot of us will cut the bread crusts off, or we don't, and the kids leave them behind. Try to serve it without cutting it off, see what happens. Kids can chew on them slowly. I actually encourage my kids to dip the crust in bread, and they think it's like this special treat. Like they think they're dipping like a cookie in bread and they love it. But sometimes they don't, and sometimes they just leave their crust behind. So I'm going to talk about a recipe that you can make out of bread crusts in just a minute. Another example is peels. You really don't have to peel everything. Most peels and some rinds are edible and have lots of nutrients. So just be sure to scrub them well and then serve the whole item. For example, there's no need to peel apples or potatoes or carrots. I know apples is probably a popular one that some older kids, they always want their apples peeled. If you do end up peeling it, that's okay. But there are fun things you can make with the peels that your kids will hopefully love. And I'll show you an example in a minute as well. Fruit and veggie bits are also left behind. I mean, Amanda earlier mentioned, giving your kid a whole apple and they take like 2 bites out of it. And then you have this like 90% whole apple. There's obviously, you could cut it up and serve it the next day. Or you could do something creative with the scraps. You can always save parts and freeze for later to make smoothies or popsicles. Fruit scraps, I sometimes just cut them up and add them to pancakes or waffles. You can also do that with fruit that is like not so fresh anymore, like your berries are getting a little soft, or you have a peach or something with some bruising, you cut off the bruising. Those are, great uses for that kind of thing. Watermelon rinds can be pickled. Some kids love pickles. And then for like veggie scraps, you can cook them into veggie muffins, for example, which Amanda's going to show you later on. Those are a big hit with her kids. So I'm going to show you just a couple of these recipes that we just talked about. Next slide. So this is my favorite one, the bread crust pudding, because who doesn't love bread pudding? But all you really need here are your bread crusts. So what I do is, this is an awesome Ziploc bag that I keep my bread crusts in. And when I've collected like most of a bag, about 5 to 6 cups or so, I just beat 2 eggs and 2 cups milk. You can add vanilla extract. You can add some kind of spices like cinnamon's good, or a pinch of nutmeg. You can also add like about half a cup of fruit if you want to jazz it up a little bit. And then you're just taking your bread crusts and you're putting them in like a loaf pan or a casserole dish. I use a 9x5. You pour the liquid over it and you put it in the oven. And this is, sorry, I'm not a chef here, but this is a bread crust bread pudding with blueberries in it. It looks very dark. I didn't burn it for once, but it has blueberries in it, so it kind of got blue. My kids love it. You take it out and you slice it up and they can't get enough of it. And I can't get enough of it because little do they know that they're eating their own bread crusts, which is a great source of satisfaction for me. All right, let's move on. Next one is, what do we have? Oh, fruit popsicles, super, super easy to make at home. And my kids love making them. They love eating them. The nice thing about this is you can obviously throw anything in a popsicle. I'm sure everyone's heard, you can throw everything in a smoothie, but popsicles are kind of viewed as like this special treat, that, at least for my kids, more than a smoothie is. So whenever we have fruit scraps laying around, or fruit that's kind of like getting a little soft, about to turn, or just too much of any fruit for any reason, I just take the fruit, I put it in the blender. You can add stuff like, you can add yogurt, you can add milk. You really don't need to, but if you need to use some yogurt or milk up, throw that in too. I don't think it needs any other sweetener like honey or sugar or anything, because fruit is so sweet on its own. You just blend them up, and the kids love helping me pour them in the popsicle molds. And I have 2 different kinds of popsicle molds. These are from IKEA. The kids love these, and these are also very small, so you actually don't need a whole lot of mixture to fill those 6. And then the kids get them and they think they're like eating dessert, but they're actually just eating like 100% fruit. So those are a really easy way to use up fruit scraps. You could probably squeeze vegetables in there too. This one is fun. Sorry, Amanda, next slide. The peeling chips. So we talked about before how you really don't need to peel things like potatoes and apples and stuff. But if you do, for whatever reason, keep the peels, let them dry out, and you can roast them very easily with some, you basically just toss them with some oil, some melted butter, and some salt. If you're doing apples, you'd probably want to pass on the salt, maybe do a little bit of sugar. And then these are some sweet potato ones that I made, and they actually taste like potato chips. They're really crunchy, just a little bit of salt. They're super good. So when I'm not saving my peels to make veggie stock later on, I'm doing this with them. And the kids love them too, of course. Go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, I think it's on to you, Amanda.
Okay, so obviously we don't want to have to hide or trick our kids into eating healthier foods. We just want them to be magical little angels who think that vegetables are delicious. But kids do often reject healthier foods. So how can we make some easy, quick, kid-friendly versions of healthy foods that they will be willing to gobble up? And there's a lot of different options, and I think that I Google this like at least once a year. But there are ways you can sneak veggies into soups, into smoothies, into sauces. You can add veggies to pasta or rice or eggs. Obviously, I do a lot of chopping into very tiny pieces so that they almost don't notice that it's there. That also makes it a little bit easier for them to chew. And then one of my personal favorites is making it a muffin or a fritter. Good ways to use either extra scraps or ugly fruit or produce, ugly fruit or vegetables, pieces of the vegetable that kids don't like broccoli stalks or cauliflower stalks, etc. Making it creamy or cheesy, always an option. You can add yogurt or cheese to anything. Put it on a pizza. You can use pre-made crust, you can use tortillas, you can use English muffins, you can use polenta to make crust, and then just add some sauce and veggies, and hopefully they think it's pizza and will eat it. You can also experiment with different dips, yogurt-based peanut sauces that aren't too spicy, ranch dip, bean-based dips. My nieces coined the term dip, which always made it feel like it was something more fun. Sometimes that meant syrup, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I think dip can apply to all dips and make things fun. And then you can always add toppings, like, again, cheese is always a favorite. Just make things cheesy and kids seem to like it more, or crunchy things, etc. And so I will talk about one of my favorite trick-or-treat kind of hiding the veggies recipes, which is Veggie Muffins. This is one of my favorite things because it is so flexible, and kids never notice. There is just something about putting things in muffin shape. You can make them big, you can make them mini. They are so easily freezable. They are microwavable, or you can put them in the toaster. They can go in lunch boxes. They're an acceptable addition to breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or snack. So you can basically serve them at any meal. And they're incredibly easily adaptable, and they hide veggies well. So I make muffins probably 1 weekend a month, and then I just keep a big bag in the freezer. And I'll just show, this is a tiny bag of some zucchini carrot muffins that I'll talk through the recipe, but I have a bigger bag in the freezer. I just didn't want to unfreeze all of them. And so this is pretty easy, just various ingredients. This one calls for honey. And you just mix together the wet ingredients, you fold in the veggies, super easy. And then as far as options, it's just sort of unlimited. You can do sweet or savory. You can mix and match fruits and veggies. I do pretty often zucchini and carrots, mostly because my daughter thinks she hates carrots, and so I'm constantly like giving her carrot muffins to prove her wrong, whether that's good parenting or not. I usually make some big ones and some mini ones because kids, they're like, I want a big one, I want a tiny one, you know. You can also always use different sweeteners or no sweeteners if you want. You can also make your own applesauce out of apples that are starting to go bad, or if you go apple picking. Applesauce is a great sweetener so that you don't have to use additional sugar. You can sneak in spinach, you can sneak in all kinds of things, and you can also add cheese or yogurt depending on what you're going for. And frosting, totally up to you. Don't feel bad, you're already giving them vegetables. And when you have tried everything else, eat it yourself. I honestly have plenty of days when I just don't make myself a plate and I eat what is left on their plate. That is kind of my life as a mom, and I'm sure others can sympathize with that. Next is schedule a leftover party once a week where the whole family eats leftovers together. I think this is a really fun idea because it normalizes the practice of eating leftovers, and they might even look forward to getting creative with like whatever is in the fridge. You can call it a fridge party, a fridge buffet. You can just take out like everything that's in the fridge, and then they get to, you know, pick and choose what they want, and go around like a buffet table. And then you can add toppings, sauces, salsa, etc. Have you ever made a batch of something that your family just didn't like? Sometimes you just wind up eating it all yourself. Sometimes you can freeze some of it. But if you have a neighbor that you're friends with, you could also offer to trade dishes with other families and neighbors. They might be happy not to cook that day, and you will have saved that dish from the trash or compost. Get a dog. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. I honestly sometimes think I don't really know how much food is going to waste in my house because I do have a dog and he eats everything. And I think sometimes my kids just like drip Cheerios and my dog cleans them up. But I will say that feeding scraps to animals is like the original mechanism for how food waste got taken care of. That's how they do it on farms. And so we have sort of forgotten about that, but I do. And while I try not to give him like sugar and obviously the things that dogs can eat, my dog does eat quite a fair amount of scraps. And then compost. I think we always want to work on preventing our food waste first. That should be our first priority, and then, you know, recovering it for human use. But composting is obviously a great option. In DC, there are many options, including backyard composting. You can bring your food scraps to farmers markets. There are DPW community collaboratives that I used to be a part of one, and it was really wonderful. They exist at sites in 56 parks around the city, so you can find out if you have one in your neighborhood. Or you could also pay a service to pick up your food scraps, such as veterans or compost crew, compost cap, etc. No matter how you compost, you can involve your children in putting the food scraps into a bin on your counter, which will help them understand that food is not trash, and that it is going to be turned into something amazing. We have a tumbler in our backyard, and, you know, we'll have my kids come and like help me put the scraps into it or put the leaves into it afterwards. So just remember, you're always setting an example, but also give yourself a break, and it's okay.
Thanks, Amanda. So we want to talk a little bit about sort of instilling the value of food at an early age. There's lots of studies out there that talk about how valuing food leads to not wanting to waste it. And so you want to sort of start that mindset at an early point. It's okay if your kids aren't young, it's like never too late, but the younger your kids are and you start, you know, emphasizing that food is not trash and that food is valuable, the better. So there's a few different small things you can do to help emphasize that at home. Planting a garden, even if it's just one tomato plant on a windowsill, have the kids plant the seed, have them water the plant, and talk about, you know, what it's taking to grow that, even if it's just like an herb, what it's taking to get that from the seed to, you know, something that produces something that humans can eat. Or plant a whole backyard garden. That's even better, but we can start with just one plant and have them help take care of it. Visit a farm where food is grown and talk about what it takes to get the food from that farm all the way to their plates. You know, we often take for granted that, you know, food's in the store, we can easily go grab it and bring it home and cook or have a ready cooked meal. What we don't often think about is the incredible journey that it takes for food not only to be grown, but then it's got to go in a truck. It's got to go, you know, it's got to get packed. It's got to go in a truck. It's got to go to the store. It's got to be, you know, laid out in the store. Then we have to buy it, bring it home and cook it. You can talk about that with your kids. You don't have to go to a farm. You can talk about that at a farmer's market, at a grocery store, or just in your kitchen while you're cooking and serving food. But there's definitely been a lot of studies that show that we've really lost sight of like what it takes to get our food from farm to fork, and kids aren't necessarily learning that in school all the time. So it's something that it's important to talk about. And of course, let them help you in the kitchen. My kids are at a place where they really love to do little things like get stuff out of the fridge or set the table or crack eggs or just put things out for dinner. They feel more involved with the food because they're part of the process that gets that food on the table. And then, you know, have them help clean up and put leftovers back in the fridge. in my house, I don't think my kids have ever seen me throw food out, because we're either going to put it in the compost bin or we're going to put leftovers back in the fridge. Of course, once in a while, something gets moldy and I've got to throw it out, but I'm putting it in the compost bin, right? So I don't actually think they've ever seen me throw food away. And so that mindset is there, that like food isn't trash. We don't put food in the trash. And I even heard her say that the other day. And of course, I had a very proud mom moment, which are like few and far between sometimes. And of course, as Amanda mentioned, have your kids do the compost, have them help put the scraps in the bin, take it to the backyard or take it to the farmer's market or wherever you might be composting. And talk about, this food is now going back into the soil and it's going to help grow other food. So those are just some ideas about how to get your kids to value food, which is a really important part of all of this. Next slide, Amanda. All right, so we want to pause. We've done a lot of talking. We've covered a lot of different issues. What is on your mind? What are you still grappling with things that maybe we haven't mentioned? Are there issues you're having that you've tried everything and you're just kind of at the end of your patience? Feel free to take yourself off mute. If you have any comments or questions, don't be shy. This is definitely a safe, non-judgmental space. Or any reactions to anything we've said. Nobody wants to be brave, or you're just too tired to complain at this point, right? Okay.
Hey, Amanda, it's Cheryl, and I don't have kids, so I can't really, relate to all these issues. But I just want to say, you guys both gave me some great ideas just for my own leftovers and things that I can make that sound easy and delicious. So thank you for those tips.
Oh, good.
Sure. Anything else? I mean, are there issues that you feel like you're still grappling?
Yeah.
Yes. So my youngest always wants sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, but she only licks the peanut butter and jelly off of the bread. So we don't have a crust issue. It's a bread issue. And then what happens is we have this whole soggy piece of bread that she won't eat. And we talk about it with her in advance. She commits to eating it, but then she doesn't. Any advice?
We've experienced that in our house as well. Usually so that'll happen with our 3-year-old. She'll lick the stuff off the bread and then she'll ask for more jam. And I will not give her more jam. I will say, you already ate all the jam, so you need to finish the bread. You can dip it in your milk if you still want like a topping for the bread. I will sometimes take that bread and I'll maybe eat it myself, or I will put it in my bag of bread crusts for my bread crust pudding and then feed it back to her. Mm-hmm. I wonder since she's really more interested in the toppings and not the bread, like, would it change if you put those things on crackers instead of the bread?
Like, I'm wondering what if you like switch to either crackers, which is like they're yummy, they're crunchy, there's all different kinds, or like celery, probably would be like a no-go, but then you can always like wash the celery.
I've used bananas before.
Bananas, like you can definitely make peanut butter and jelly on a banana if you need to. It's a little hard, but you can.
Okay.
Another thought I have, it sounds like she thinks she likes the idea of a sandwich, but then when it comes down to it, she really just wants the spreads.
Yeah.
Do you think that cutting the sandwich in like a cool shape would help? They have those like cutters like in like a cat shape or like a heart shape or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You could try it. It's, you're going to end up with a little bit of waste because you're basically cutting. It's like a creative way to cut the crusts off, because when you use one of those molds, like some of the outside edge is going to be off, which you can then throw in your bread pudding or eat yourself. But you could try that just because it would make it more fun. Like, oh, here's a heart-shaped peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Who knows? It could be worth a shot.
Right. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but is she old enough that you could ask her, like, would she tell you, like, does she just not like the bread?
She says she wants the bread and will eat the bread, and then she doesn't fall through.
Yeah. We experience the same thing in my house too. Not every time, but yeah.
I also wonder if you could try, I know doesn't sound super easy, but like if you can make skinnier slices of bread.
If you're cutting it yourself.
Yeah, depending on if you're cutting it yourself, or like if there's a way, I sometimes will even cut like a bagel into skinnier slices,
Mhm.
and maybe it's actually too big for her mouth, or those kinds of things. I don't know.
Okay.
I will say that we have similar things in my family, and my kids are really into cracker sandwiches. They constantly ask for cream cheese on crackers. And so I'll put cream cheese in between two crackers. And I'll tell you, Kara, it's really hard for them to lick the cream cheese off of the crackers. Like they kind of just have to eat the cracker if they want the cream cheese.
Yeah.
And so that's a sandwich, but it's a sandwich that's on crackers, and maybe more likely that the crackers get eaten too.
Great.
I don't
Thank
know.
you for the tips. These are great.
Yeah, you just you just got to try different things because we never know what they're going to do. What else? Other challenges, issues?
Yeah, I think, let me see.
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. I'm on a very little screen on my phone. So one thing I think that I know you do, but you haven't mentioned is that there's an in-between what you can eat and what is you can't really eat anymore, but not ready to be thrown out, which is all these peelings and stuff, or maybe you're getting there to make stock, vegetable stock.
Yeah, that's a great point. So what my mother Heidi is referring to is when you have like mushroom stalks or broccoli stalks or asparagus tips, or like the ends of onions, or any kind of like potato, carrot peels. What a lot of people do is you take those scraps and put them in a bag or a Tupperware in your freezer. And then when you have a full bag, you make stock out of them. So that is definitely something you can do with almost any kind of vegetable scrap. I would only advise against not putting too many onion skins in there because they make it really bitter for some reason. But that is a great use of all those veggie odds and ends. You can also throw chicken bones or any other kind of bone, if you eat meat, into the stock bag as well. So that's definitely like a great approach to using up all those odds and ends. Any other questions, challenges, thoughts?
I'm intrigued by the sandwich, the peanut butter jelly sandwich. I was wondering if you were to put that between two slices of that yummy cupcake, for instance, that will stick also, and then they won't be able to lick it off and get the benefit of the type of bread that has a lot of nutrition. Might be worth a try. I don't know.
That's a good, yeah. Stuff the muffin with peanut butter and jelly.
Or in a
Or apple
pancake.
slices.
Hmm?
Pancakes or apple slices. Yeah, I mean, you could make sandwiches out of all kinds of different things
Right.
that maybe are more likely to be eaten than bread. It's a good point. Seems like bread is a common challenge for a lot of people, especially the crusts.
All right, that's it.
Any other thoughts or challenges, questions, reactions? Okay, well, feel free to jump in anytime. We're actually almost done. We have a few other things we wanted to share with you. So Amanda, do you want to go to the next slide? And of course, if you all think of anything, just put it in the chat and we'll definitely get to your questions. So we do want to mention a couple additional resources. There might be some people in this Zoom who are educators or who work with youth groups or children or in schools. And so there's some great resources out there for not only educators, but also parents, especially since a lot of parents are now playing that dual role at home. The CEC Food Matters Action Kit, which you see here pictured on the left, is a wonderful activity kit. It has 20 activities for kids and youth ages 5 to 25. These activities can be done at home. They can be done in a youth group setting, in a school setting. So there's a lot in there. There's 10 activities for the younger age set and 10 activities for the older age set. And they cover things like how to build a compost bin or how to do a household food waste inventory, like Amanda was talking about earlier. ranging to like more complicated food system activities for like the older age group. But it's really a lovely toolkit. It's free. It's available in Spanish and French as well. So that's a great one to check out. Another resource we wanted to point you all to is the website savethefood.com. Now, this one is not specific to kids, but it is a really great website with all kinds of resources to help you waste less food. So they've got things like the guesstimator, which, you know, maybe not so relevant right now because we're not having huge dinner parties, but helps you figure out like how much of each item you should cook if you have people coming over. They've got really wonderful storage guides to help you store food for maximum freshness so it lasts longer. A lot of us are actually storing our food incorrectly, which leads to waste. They've got some meal planning ideas. They've got some use it up recipes. It's just a lovely website to check out. And Amanda, do you want to talk about the WWF items?
Sure. And then sort of a shameless plug for a program that I help with is our Food Waste Warrior program, where we work with schools across the country and the world on food waste reduction activities in classrooms and in cafeterias, where we're really encouraging sort of an experiential learning project where kids go and do food audits in their cafeterias to see how much is being wasted, and then they learn about the environmental impacts of that food waste in their classrooms as well. And this is actually a sneak preview. We are about to re-release. We've done some updates on our curriculum so that it's more broken into specific grade bands. So you could look up what ages your kids are in and then download like specific activities that are relevant for them. They're really great. And it's just kind of simple, fun activities that you can do either with students or with your kids at home. And they should be up by the end of the month, which will be exciting. So it's just worldwildlife.org, Food Waste Warriors. It's free to download and just easy and fun stuff to do.
Awesome. And then we just, for those who really want to dive in deep, there are additional resources out there. I did just drop a link to today's slides in the chat, so you can go ahead and grab those off of Google Drive if you want, and then you can have the links to all these. But these are just some other like handouts, some hands-on activities. There's a food waste coloring book, the two that we already mentioned, and then there's some videos as well. There's so much out there. But this is just a small smattering or small selection. If you are interested in a deeper dive on this, Amanda and I would be happy to provide you with some more information and links and tools for teaching kids about food waste, whether it's your family or if you're an educator. So that is all we have for today. Again, I'll do one last, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to jump in the chat or to take yourself off mute. And of course, feel free to reach out to us if you do have questions or if there's something we said that, you think about later and want to talk. We're here to help. We know that having kids and dealing with food waste can be challenging and frustrating. And we hope that, we taught you some things you can take home and try, and hopefully something works and something sticks. So we really appreciate your participation and hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Everybody. Now I'm sure if people have Zoom fatigue.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.